Evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 12th voting meeting of the Keystone Central School District Board of Directors. We'll start with the salute to the flag and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Give us a second here to get settled and get everybody in. You can leave that open, Billy. It's okay.
Please. Do we have a secretary?
Yeah, that's what she'll be here, I would think.
When we run down, tell Tracy.
Yeah, she's here. I was asking her
I think
a
she's the
couple
only one.
questions on text.
Yeah, she was.
If you guys want to come up and anybody who talks will have to talk into the microphone or the people at home cannot hear. Yeah, and pass it down the line. Chad, are you going to share the presentation?
I can, yeah. Yeah, I'll have to pull it down from board docs, but I can.
You're the best. We've got a little bit of time. We still have to do roll call.
What we used to do. Get in line for a senior project. Yeah. Things that here.
Are you hot?
Related to all this. Senior project.
Sorry, we were
Oh,
running late and I just started right in, not thinking that you weren't here yet. Sorry.
He's a junior, so I don't know if he's-
So whenever you're ready, what roll calls.
Yeah, one time it was like-
No, that was last week. So
Loaded the kid in and, back and landed.
Mr. Dietrich,
Here.
Mrs. Donahue, Mr. Elling,
Present.
Mr. Johnston,
Here.
Mr. Knopf,
Here.
Mr. Koch, Ms. Lynch,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
and Mrs. Smith.
here.
7 members present.
All right. So last week, May 5th, the Board of Directors held an executive session from 7:45 PM to 8:35 PM to discuss legal and personnel matters. And today from 6 PM to 6:32 PM to discuss legal matters. So we're going to start off tonight with a presentation on our school-wide positive behavior supports.
So thanks for having us. I have 3 lovely ladies with me. So Christina Manning, the Director of Pupil Services. I have Kelly Swartwood, our district-wide behavioral specialist. I have Dr. Billy Miller, one of our counselors at Central Mountain Middle School, and then Christina Williams, our ROB counselor, one of our ROB counselors. So tonight we are going to talk to you. We have a lot of information. We're going to try to go fast, keep it focused on our multi-tiered system of support and our school-wide positive behavior support. So in 2019, 2020, we began looking pretty deeply into what school supports and systems that we have in place district-wide and at each of our district or our schools. But you all know how that year ended. It ended with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, which then kind of forced us into figuring out how to get technology to kids, how to teach kids, how to help teachers teach kids, and how to feed kids, and how to ensure that everyone is safe. So our focus then had to shift a little bit. Coming full circle, recognizing that we still need to be able to service our students and know what supports we have in place and how to get those supports to those students. We began looking last summer, really pretty deeply at what supports we have in place, school-wide, district-wide, and where our holes were. And part of that was also looking at how are we using our positive school-wide behavior support systems, district-wide and school-wide. And it was really cool, the work that we found because that we did. So we discovered that we have a lot of really great supports in place, but they all kind of function in silos and people really weren't sure how to access those supports. So we then began looking at, okay, how do we develop a system to make sure that we have supports for everybody who needs them and that we have a system that works to help us get those supports to the students who need them. So we've been doing this work and we're excited, and hopefully by the end, you'll have a really good idea of where we've been and where we're going and what work we have yet to do. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you. So the first slide that we included in our presentation, just,
Kelly,
oh, I'm sorry.
can you pull that a
Yeah.
little closer?
If you're
Thank
sorry.
you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. That's okay. Can you hear me? So the first slide talks to you about what the core components of building a multi-tiered system of school-wide positive behavior support are to support students socially, behaviorally, and socially. And so the core components we really wanted to emphasize was how do we create a system? And that is exactly what Christina was talking about, is how do we create a system that's going to sustain over time? And how are we going to implement that system with fidelity? So that's truly what we've been trying to focus on. We wanted the system to be very much similar across our schools. We know we have students that might move between schools. And if we start teaching them those expectations from kindergarten, certainly by the time they get to 8th and 9th grade, they're going to have the benefit of them being taught those expectations multiple times across multiple locations. So we really focused on having these common expectations that has common language, and then all the expectations, the cafeteria folks are familiar with what they are, our janitors are familiar with what they are, and our bus drivers are familiar with what they are, as long as everyone else that's in our district as well. So those big expectations that we're teaching students in K-8 already, but then next year we'll be at the high school as well, is we're looking at being respectful, being responsible, being safe, being kind, and then we're adding be professional, as you know how important that is for students at the high school level. So that will be one of the common expectations across the district next year. And once we have those common expectations established, we have to actually teach them. So we don't expect students are coming to school just knowing specifically how to be respectful. We know that's something that some students struggle with and some adults struggle with. So we want to formally teach those specific skills. And so then once we see them demonstrating those skills, how do we acknowledge them for demonstrating those specific skills? So some systems have not been successful in the past because they focus on just one of those core components instead of building the entire system. So we don't want it to just be recognition or just be teaching. We want it to be all of the core components of an effective system that's implementing with fidelity in place. The next piece we want to make sure that we are doing is we have a formal system that's in place now called the Swiss system that Dr. Miller is going to talk to you more about. And then that system helps us to be able to look at the data and to see, are we implementing interventions effectively? We're asking that we wanted to come and speak with you because we want all of our stakeholders to be engaged in those interventions. We want parents to be engaged in the interventions, our community, our teachers, paraprofessionals, everyone to be engaged in those interventions. And then we also want to have a process in place where we monitor our implementation to make sure we're implementing with fidelity. That's the last core component.
Chad, you can just stay on that slide. So this is, we call it our MTSS framework. And so this has been a really cool thing that we've enjoyed working on because it gives us a visualization of what supports do we have in place that can address the positive behavior interventions, our mental health, our academics, our social emotional learning, and our restorative practices. And what areas are we lacking? So it's really cool how it breaks it down because that bottom level explains to you all of the interventions and supports and programs that all of our students have access to at the tier 1 level. And then it goes into our tier 2 level, which is our students who in small groups who have a need for those types of supports in place. And you can it's kind of hard to see. It's pretty small. But it's nice because then you're gradually going from tier 1 to tier 2. And then if you need tier 3 is your most restrictive types of supports and interventions and programs because they're provided to individual students who might need them. So obviously that's something that you want your smallest portion of your student population to be accessing. You want at least 80% of your students to be successful at tier 1, and 15 at tier 2 and 5% at tier 3. So going through the process of completing this framework, we were able to see what programs we have in place and where do we have some holes. And then as we've kind of come back from the pandemic, and we've seen new behaviors that we haven't seen before, we've been able to add programs and to get those supports in place so that we can address those specific needs for those students. So while this is a work in progress, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's something that we're excited about. And it also acts as that guide to help us. We'll have expectations of when do you access those supports and programs, and when do you no longer need that support, when maybe do you need a more restrictive support or a lesser support. So it allows our teachers and our principals to be able to flow and to support our students with whatever programming they need.
Okay, before you guys go, I'm not the brightest bulb in the light, but I'm kind of curious. What's the triangle for?
So the triangle shows what interventions we should be putting for students. So like she was saying, the green is the bottom one that should be for all students. And hopefully those interventions that we put in place help 80% of our kids. It's not going to help all of them, obviously. And so the second level is the yellow, which it's a little higher on that picture, but the yellow is for kids that don't get it on teaching
For the smaller
expectations.
groups.
Yeah.
Like it's saying there.
Yeah, the small group, and that's 15%. And
Right.
some of those small groups aren't going to fix all students. So the 5% are the red students that with tier 1 and tier 2, they're not being successful, and we need more intensive services for them. And so hopefully
What are we
that's
doing for all
5%.
Students, what are we doing for some and what are we doing for a few?
Yeah.
And each time it goes up to the higher part of the triangle, it's a more intensive support.
Just want to ask a question. I already
Yeah.
wrote stuff down. What do we do after tier 3? When it doesn't work?
Yeah, because I was kind of looking at that red and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, what happens there?
So unfortunately, sometimes that means students need alternative placements, which obviously cost the district money. So, when we do these things better, which every year we've gotten better. This is only my second year in Keystone Central, but we can catch some of these kids just by teaching that green stuff, just by teaching that tier 1, those expectations, those school-wide roles, and keeping that consistent. If we don't, we put them in check in, check out. We give them a behavior chart, we monitor them, we give them a mentor, we give them that second level of support, and we can hopefully catch some of that. Some of them might not, and they might go to tier 3, but eventually it's going to help save the district a lot of money because we're not going to get to those what if kids that have gone through all 3 levels and we don't have any other choice. And it's an alternative placement that can be thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars per student. So it'll be interesting for us to come back with you once we have more data to show you that this stuff is working.
And interestingly enough, I've been starting to see some of the academic data from Ames Web starting to trickle in. And I'm actually so impressed with it that I want to share it with the board in June, because the academic interventions where we're targeting specific skills with specific children is showing that we are making great gains with the interventions. So we'd like to, it's not going to happen overnight, but we are starting to see signs of success from this tiered model. And we're going to just continue to work at it.
Just going to add, because I've been in 2 neighboring school districts, and this is my first year here at Keystone Central, my home district, so I'm so excited. But being at this district and at the elementary level, we have more support than my 2 neighboring districts at the elementary level that I worked at. And just by adding another counselor at Rob was very helpful. And then having our school-based program there as well, just having that house. So there are more supports. I just want to assure you in our district, especially at the elementary level. So that's kudos to you all.
So Chad, if you can turn it to the next slide. So everyone that I work pretty close with know that this is like my favorite slide. And I'm going to tell you, I think this is the best slide out of all of them, because truly both of these ladies have talked about systems. If we don't do systems the right way, we're all wasting our time, money, and energy. And so these 4 circles are the most important thing of what we do with PBIS. We need to have efficient systems, which are like our monthly team meetings that we're all getting together. We're all working on things so that our everyday practices are more efficient, are streamlined. We're looking at the data to make sure that the outcomes that we want are happening. So in our monthly tier 1 and our tier 2 and tier 3 advanced tiers meetings, we have a representative from every grade level. So it's everybody in the building having a voice so that we can look at where are the struggles for our students. Then we look at what are the interventions like Christina had mentioned that we can put in place that can help the student that's faltering at the tier 2 level or the tier 3 level. And it helps so because it's not all on a classroom teacher, it's not all on a school counselor, it's everybody in the building, kind of all hands on deck, trying these different interventions to help these kids be successful that aren't getting it at that tier 1 level. We look at all the data, we look at office discipline referrals, we look at attendance, we look at grades, we look at universal screeners, and we proactively see which students are struggling without the fire showing us that they're struggling. So, you know, if we have students that have 3 office referrals within a month, we might put them in a check-in, check-out behavior chart so that we give them that support. If we have students that their attendance is faltering, we might give them a mentor that they come in every morning to check in to kind of be that cheerleader, like, I'm so glad that you're at school today. Whatever interventions might help that student be successful. And then the most important part is the bigger circle, the outcomes. We measure the outcomes all the time in those monthly meetings. Are what we do, is what we're doing working? If it's not working, we need to change it. We just don't need to be the hamster on the wheel doing the same stuff that's not working. So these 4 things are the things that we're all focusing on from K eventually up to 12. And eventually, like Dr. Martin said, we're going to start seeing the outcomes. We're already starting to see it a little bit, but we're still working on those systems and practices so that it is more streamlined and more efficient so that we can really meet more students' needs. You can go to the next slide, Chad. And so this one just says this, it's not a specific curriculum. You know, I've been doing this for over 10 years. Like Christina, I was at Williamsport Area School District, and I've seen it firsthand when this is done the right way, how the data can benefit everything. So hopefully, maybe the next time if we're invited to come back, we'll have actual good data to show you what it's been like after us doing it for a couple of years.
So go ahead, Chad, to the next slide. So this slide is just a summary of what's called the District Systems Fidelity Inventory, a tool that we were actually asked to be part of piloting with our patent and our intermediate unit folks. And so this survey is a pre and a post survey. So we completed this survey at the beginning of the school year as far as a district level representative team. We have folks from all different grade levels that kind of participate. We have a district administrator from each school building or from each level. And then we completed the survey afterwards at the end of the school year to see what pieces of school-wide positive behavior support are we implementing and where do we kind of still need to build that action plan from. So the District Systems Fidelity Inventory is a tool that was piloted for teams to be able to use to build those action plans to make sure that we're implementing school-wide with fidelity and we're focusing on all of those core components. The tool is truly to build a 5-year action plan, and then we break that 5-year action plan down into a 3-year, into a 1-year that has manageable steps that go along with it. So we have it broken down into our 5-year based upon the steps of pieces that we needed to work on yet. You can see, I think we've done, we were pretty proud of ourselves of what we've accomplished just in 1 school year. The leadership teaming piece is we use an effective team meeting process that's called the TIPS model. It is a team initiated problem solving model that looks at what specifically is the problem that we're having, Where are we having it at? Who are we having it with? When's it occurring? And why is it occurring? And then we build a precise problem statement to be able to address that. We've been using that across our tier 1 meetings and across our tier 2 meetings and at our district level meetings as well. So we don't spend our time admiring problems. We spend our time building solutions. And that's truly what our meetings have been focused on. So that's what this tool has helped us to be able to do, is to build an action plan, to be able to progress monitor what it is that we're doing, and to be able to look at an annual evaluation so that we can go from there.
Chad, you can do the next slide, please. All right, this is our school-wide positive behavior matrix. So this is what Kelly was talking about in regards to those expectations: be safe, be responsible, be respectful, be kind. And then later at the high school, they'll be adding be professional. So what this is it is a chart that outlines what those positive behaviors are that we're expecting of our students. And it's also showing in the different settings. So you see that we have it in classroom, school events, in the bus. And under each of the expectations and in those settings, we have lesson plans that are developed based on those expected behaviors. So we teach students at the beginning of the year at level 1. So all students are being taught in all of these areas and all of the expectations, what that positive behavior looks like and what they're to be doing. And then what Kelly was mentioning too about the consistency, using the same expectations at all levels, K through 12, is so important. The last district I was at, they did not do that. So each building had their own, and it was very difficult when you had students transitioning from elementary into middle to high school, because it was a different set of expectations. So they had to relearn new ones. Even from within elementary schools, if they would have been at one school and transferred to another, they would have maybe different expectations. So that consistency is key of having the same expectations across the board.
Another question. So where, you said these are being taught in the beginning of the year. Is it like through in the math courses, English courses, or is it just like during homeroom?
So at the elementary level, we do stations. So each of the areas that need taught, though, there's stations for those areas, and they're divided, they rotate out. So like I teach one area, other people throughout the building teach it. And then students come and we show them what's expected, like in for the like cafeteria. They know what it looks like. They know through those key statement items what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And we do teach them at the beginning of the school year. And we also do like booster or refreshers, like after the winter break or a long holiday. And we also do it just when needed. So if you look at when Billy gets in more like the Swiss data, if you take a look at that data with office discipline referrals, you might take a look at maybe 4th grade. Wow, they're really struggling in the cafeteria. So we might want to take all of 4th grade and reteach them. And that would be another way. Or you can do it just individually too, with students can be retaught from their classroom teacher or anybody in the school. So when we talk about booster or refreshers, that could be a whole school, or it could be just a smaller group too.
Okay, I was just like
Yeah.
kind of wondering, does this get integrated
Yeah.
into like English or whatever? But
So at the
like you
middle
said, with the
school,
stations.
is that how you do state? Okay.
Okay, all right, and then elementaries during. your
We
different
rotate it out,
stations.
right? We
Okay.
do that by the end of the first week of school is when we ultimately do it. And then we do a refresher after the winter break, since it's extended, and then just as needed throughout the year.
Cool. Thank you.
I can speak about the high school a little bit as far as their plan, but, and Billy can talk to the middle school, but the high school, obviously high schoolers don't like to be taught those things in similar kinds of fashions, as you're probably aware. So the high school is going to be doing it a little bit differently, and that's pretty typical of high schools. That typically the conversation is that the administrators will present what the expectations are to the student population, and then there will be those lessons will be reinforced in the classroom. They've developed a number of different lessons to reteach the expectations. So teachers have lessons they can rotate through. The expectation is that the core common expectations are embedded within curriculum. So if you're talking about a science project, how are you teaching responsibility as you're managing your materials for a science project? So the expectation is truly we embed that instruction throughout our daily practice as well.
Okay, all right.
And this slide shows the school-wide recognition of, so the School-Wide Positive Behavior Network of Pennsylvania recognizes schools who have accomplished banner status, which means they've been successful implementing school-wide with Fidelity, and that's key with Fidelity. Part of that process is each school applies for which tier level they would like to be recognized for. So on the slide, you can see it. This is just representing right now elementary and then Central Mountain Middle School. So elementary and Central Mountain Middle School applied for Liberty Curtain, applied for tier 1. So all the blue are tier 1, and they did receive banner status for that. And then Mill Hall Elementary and the middle school applied for tier 2 status. So that's more of those other level interventions that were on that triangle chart. So like doing tier 2 interventions like that check-in, check-out mentoring that Billy talked about. And the way that this is done is through the IU. We have representatives that come to the school and they pull random students and staff and they ask them specific questions. Do you have school expectations? Can you name them? Do you get rewarded? So there's a set of questions that they ask them. And then we're based on those answers and responses, we're rated. And then if we are successful and have done it with Fidelity to show that, we are awarded banner status. So this is our 2021 in the district that have received banner status for either tier 1 or tier 1 or tier 2. And I do need to let you know that Bucktail, their set or their interview wasn't scheduled till later in May. So that's why that's not represented yet, just so you're aware.
So this slide is pretty self-explanatory. These are all the trainings that our teams have been busy doing throughout the school year. A lot of these are new programs that we have implemented this year based off of what our students' behaviors are telling us. And it's pretty cool because we have our own site trainer. Kelly can train all of our staff on restorative practices, youth first aid, mental health. She can also train on art and skill streaming training, which is a new program specifically to address aggressive behaviors and social skills. And she is also our PBIS coordinator. So she is able to train our staff on using SWIS appropriately and also keeping us in line with what we should be doing and implementing PBIS with Fidelity. So while we're adding these supports to our MTSS model, we're also looking at how are we doing PBIS and with a pretty critical lens this year. I mean, we've been hard on our teams and making sure that we're doing tier 1 and tier 2 with Fidelity. But I think our biggest challenge and kind of an exciting one is getting the high schools ready for implementation next year. So this year was a planning year, which takes a lot of time and prep and getting everybody around, especially since it's not really perceived too positively at that level. You know, it's perceived as to be elementary, but I always say there is room for elementary and secondary, because if you don't have the relationships and the expectations and you don't expect, like, you think that your kids don't should know how to do things by the time they get to the secondary level, it's going to be a long road because many of those kids don't come knowing how to do those basic things, or they don't have that positive relationship with someone at home or within the community. So this is why this is so critical. So I'm excited to see that get kicked off at the high schools next year. So I think we've had a lot of training and we have more training planned for this summer. So we will be busy and hopefully we can get back to you with a lot of more positive progress.
Christina, how will that look at the high school level as compared to elementary? As far as the implementation goes, or Kelly or whoever can best answer that.
we're still going to be implementing the core components of school-wide positive behavior support. So the teaching is going to look a little bit different. The reinforcement levels might not be quite as high because hopefully at the high school level, we have the expectation that hopefully they've learned some of that. But obviously students who have not yet would be more of a tier 2 or a tier 3 and would have more access to a different type of reinforcement as well. We certainly still are monitoring their data. We're looking a lot at the restorative practices type piece at the high school. So we know that the data that suspensions are not really effective in reducing problematic behavior. So we're saying, how do we build better relationships with students? Because we know that really has a huge impact on student dropping out of high school. So we've began a little bit this school year. We've run a few circles in some of our high school classrooms. We had, I thought, a very positive perspective of the students they felt that that was helpful in managing some of the classroom behaviors. And we've also used some restorative conferencing for students that have had behaviors against one another to hopefully help to give a better explanation as to why that behavior was inappropriate as far as a name calling incident specifically. So it's going to look a little bit different in the implementation, but it's using the same core components.
I guess my biggest concern at that level is the lack of respect for, not just the teachers, but for each other and people in general. And I guess that's what I see is really lacking. And you're right, they don't learn that. They don't have that. And I think we make a lot of assumptions of kids coming into the high school level and in the middle school level that, well, because they're older, that they know that stuff. But, whatever you can do through this program to improve that. And I think that's sorely needed.
I agree with you. And I will tell you, we actually, I get a lot of time to spend with the folks at the high school, and we were able to dig pretty deeply into their data of what we have this year from being our first full year of Swiss data. And truly, when you dig into that data, our primary students who are receiving those office discipline referrals, if you think about, I think we have around 1,100 students at the high school, between 11 and 12, if that's correct. And it was 31 students. So when you look at that and you look at who falls within that tier 3, now those students were making up probably about 75% of our office discipline referrals. So that's pretty outstanding when you think about that. It's just a small number of students that yet are causing a degree of havoc. So it's really focusing, what do we have at place for those tier 3 students? And the special education office has some programmatic type things that they'll be rolling out next year with those students as well.
Well, I think the reteaching is very important. In
Very
fact,
true.
Billy probably remembers when we would do that at Mill Hall.
Yep.
And so it does work. I mean, especially if you go back and reinforce it and reinforce what your expected behaviors are, it does work. So I'm excited about putting this into place. I'll be anxious to see what your results are.
Thank you. And it is true, students at those upper tiers, they don't need different interventions. They need more access to those interventions. And teaching is one of those that we can
Right.
give more access to.
Good, thanks.
But don't you see a problem with us trying to teach them that for 7 hours a day, and they're having that outside influence for, the other 17? Then how do we combat that? So then how do we balance the educational needs for the other kids in the classroom when you have that one disruptive kid in there that doesn't care about your tier 3? So what do we do there?
Yeah, and I think, back to the piece you mentioned about the respect, there's a number of students in your building. When I say it's 31 of your students at the high school level that are making up the majority of our office disciplinary
At
referrals.
Central Mountain High School, we have 2.
Central, I apologize. I'm looking at
Yeah,
Central
I'm
Mountain.
used to that.
I
Yeah, yeah.
apologize.
So-
So that data at Central Mountain High School, when we look at that piece of making that adjustment for those students, how do we formally kind of, the students want to see those changes as well. The students at Bucktail want to see those changes as well.
Most of the students, yes.
The majority of students, yes. And I know my son is a 9th grader here at the high school. And so just back to that respect piece you talked about, he said, I can't believe the number of times I've heard students be disrespectful to teachers. And it truly is that piece if we have that common expectation and then we have consequences that are addressing those behaviors. And I think that's a key piece to look at as well. Are we actually reducing problematic behaviors by the consequences that we're using? And if they're not effective, we should find different consequences.
But I think to go with what both of you are saying, one thing is we will, at the middle school, at Central Mountain Middle School, we have a student team, and I believe the high school is going to as well. So it's that voice that comes from students that tells us what are some things that you will be motivated by as far as rewards go, but also that voice of what they feel the problems are. So it's not just the adults thinking about it and looking at data to determine what the problems are. So those student teams have been really helpful, at least to us so far at the middle school. And I think that's important. Also, I'm sure you guys are aware that we have a kindness grant. So some of that respect has been coming through this past year at the middle school with the kindness grant. And I believe they are applied again. So more of those initiatives will help with those things specifically, hopefully. So if you can go to the next slide.
Oh, hold on one second. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Thank you. If you prefer questions at the end, just let me know. Let us all,
Yes.
please. Do you prefer?
Let's do it at the end.
Got it. Thank
Not
you.
specific. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'll get you then.
So this next slide says the district-wide, school-wide information systems. So that's what SWIS is, SWIS. You'll hear us talk about that a lot. If you remember my favorite slide that I presented earlier on the 4 circles, data was one of those key components. The SWIS system is that data warehouse that all of us have access to. So within my building as a school counselor, I don't have to go down to the main office, pull a file, figure out what their office referrals are. I can pull it up online. I can pull it up at home, and I can break that data down. So SWIS is important for those office referrals, but SWIS also has another component that monitors our check-in, check-out system, and that's our daily behavior charts. And that kind of goes with what Mr. Knopf was saying, like those tough kids that Kelly was talking about, how do you reach them? And it's by check-in, check-out, it's by assigning them a mentor, getting a connection, because you're right, the 7 hours we have in the day is tough to undo the rest of that. But when they have that tier 2 or tier 3 support, of like, I'm a check-in, check-out coach for one of my students, I can see her making different changes. Her attendance has already gotten better. She's excited that she's earning prizes. And yeah, it's middle school, but we've seen it work at the high school because it's showing that someone cares, because some of these kids go home to no one that does care, or they don't even go home because nobody cares to even have them come home. So like check-in, check-out and mentoring specifically, I think is where we're going to see a lot of these changes come about. But the SWIS system helps us to monitor all of this. So on the left-hand side, that's not the updated one. I put numbers up there, but you'll see the on the left, if you count most of them, it adds up to 7. And that's what we call the Big 7 report. So we look at that every single month. We look at that data. It's the average referrals of office referrals per day, per month, by location, by problem behavior, by time, by student, by day of the week, by grade. It is amazing information for us to really break down this data to see what are the problems. Instead of us putting fires out, we can analyze the problems beforehand. And like Christina said, we can go into the cafeteria and do a reteaching, because that's where the problems are. We're getting a lot of office referrals that way. So it's a really cool way that we can be proactive. We can look at the trends in behavior, and we can intervene, and we can teach to those behaviors to help our students be more successful. And then the tier 2 committee uses the information on the right-hand side. So we can use this to analyze the office discipline referrals that students have. We can break it down to see why they're struggling. We can look at the time of day, the motivation for why they're struggling, the problem behavior, the location, and we can really analyze for each student, why are they struggling, and what interventions can we put into place that are really going to be effective, instead of us just guessing as to what they might need, kind of thing. Also on that right-hand side, within SWIS, we can monitor our check-in, check-out, which is our daily behavior chart. So we can show a student that this is their goal line, and they've got 10 days that they've made their goal and it's green, and they've got 3 that's red. And that's a great visualization. Even when I was in elementary, 5-year-olds get it. They want to see more green, that they're doing a good job. They get that positive feedback that they're sometimes not getting at home. And so this Swiss system is just an amazing way, especially once we all really get it and use it. It's just an amazing way that we're going to get in front of these problems. We're going to be more proactive. We're going to hopefully prevent a lot of outplacement things, and we're going to keep our kids in school learning. And like Dr. Martin said, research shows how much it affects the academic outcomes as well.
So just as a comment, the district has had this Swiss system in place in some schools, and some principals were using it. But this is the first time this school year, well, maybe last school year, starting, that I have seen whole teams use it effectively together to make decisions. And so I'm very pleased with the progress that we've made using the information system. It's a very inexpensive system for the value that we get out of it.
So another component of that system is, go ahead, Chad, to the next slide, please. Another component of that system is there's called the PBIS assessment. And PBIS assessment, we get free access to because we are part of the network that Christina Williams mentioned to you. So it's called the Pennsylvania Positive Behavior Support Network. In PBIS assessment, we have some different assessment tools that we can access that gives us some perception data, as well as the tiered fidelity inventory data. So the first survey that's mentioned is a self-assessment survey, and that's a survey that anyone in our school buildings can complete. The expectation as far as the network is concerned is that we have 80% of our professional staff complete that survey. That helps to give us a good perspective of how we're actually doing with implementation. So it's not one person's opinion, it's everyone in our building's opinion of our implementation. The school safety surveys, the next survey that's mentioned there, that is a survey that looks at our risk factors and looks at our protective factors across our buildings to see if we have high risk factors. It rates them on a scale of 1 to 3, anything above a 2. Obviously, poverty is one of our big risk areas. So what are some protective factors we can put in place to kind of address that? So we have students that have backpack programs for meals for weekends or things like that we might consider. The tiered fidelity inventory was mentioned earlier. That was the tool that the state actually used that can look for recognition and see if we're meeting those fidelity of implementation across all 3 tiers. So if we score an 80% score in whichever tier we apply for, that allows us to gain banner status for that specific tier. The school climate survey is a survey that looks at how our students perceive the climate of our building, how our families perceive the climate of our building, and how our faculty perceive the climate of our building. So that survey is it's a different survey for elementary, for middle, for high. And we have students completed that in the beginning of the school year. We'll be completing it next week again, so we can look in the pre and post survey data to see if our kindness kind of grants have helped us to increase and improve the school climate of all of our schools. Okay, you can go ahead, Chad, to the next one. So PBIS evaluation is the next slide that we're going to talk to you about. So this is a newer tool to us that we are going to be the next slide, Chad, please. The PBIS evaluation is going to allow us to look at a systems level approach to see if we are our tiered fidelity inventory. Do we have specific areas across our district that our schools are struggling with? So is it a tier 1 teaching of expectations? Is it a stakeholder concern that we're not addressing? Parental involvement was one of the areas that came up as an area that our families rated themselves that they don't feel like they have a lot of family participation within our schools. So are we providing enough opportunities for them to actively be engaged within our school systems? So that's one of the pieces that the PBIS evaluation will help us to look at. The check-in, check-out that Dr. Miller mentioned to you, it's going to help us to look across all of our school buildings that are implementing check-in, check-out to see what trends we can identify district-wide. So this tool really helps us just to get a broader view of all of those systems on a more global basis to see what are the trends and the needs that we're seeing at a district level. If we're having a lot of students that are experiencing attention-seeking kind of behaviors, how do we find an intervention that specifically is addressed to meet that attention-seeking behavior and teach students how to gain attention in more appropriate ways? It also has a national average comparison that's pretty cool. So it helps us to be able to compare our per day, per month referrals across schools on a national basis. So are we falling above that national rate of office discipline referrals per day, per month? And then it helps us to look at equity data to make sure that we're not over-representing specific populations in our office discipline data.
I think the cool thing about all that stuff is it's helping the upper administration make all of us do our job. Truly, from K to 12, it's making us all be consistent, making us all be accountable. So I think that's the part that would be most beneficial for you guys to hear, that they're all supporting us and making us all do it. It's not just some buildings that are doing this. And that's the part that's going to really help for our entire district.
All right, Chad, can you do the next slide, please? So this slide is showing the elementary student climate survey. And this, I'm going to go over the elementary one. In the climate survey, what is good about that? It was given to elementary students, just grades 3 and 4. And what it is, it's a set of questions that has 4 dimensions to it. And you can see it involves school connectedness, school safety, school orderliness, and peer and adult relations. So students at the elementary level, grades 3 and 4, were asked 11 questions, and they were to respond with a Likert scale of never, sometimes, other, or always. So you can see depicted on there the elementary schools, and then question Q1 is question 1. So question 1 was, I like school. Question 2, I feel like I do well in school. Question 3, my school wants me to do well. My school has clear rules for behavior. Question 4. Question 5, teachers treat me with respect. Number 6, good behavior is noticed at my school. Number 7, I get along with other students. Number 8, I feel safe at school. Number 9, students treat each other well. Number 10, there's an adult at my school who will help me if I need it. And number 11, students in my class behave so that teachers can teach. And what is so important about this that was mentioned earlier is just these student climate surveys give students voice. So it's their perception on what's going on in our buildings, in our schools. So it's the good, the strengths that they're seeing and the perceptions of those strengths. So what we're doing well, and then the needs. What is it that we need to do better? So the next slide, you can go ahead, Chad, is going to break out looking at the elementary level, the results for elementary. We're going to take a look at it at the 4 highest rating overall for elementary, the questions that they rated the 4 highest. And we're going to do that in school-wide. We use a 4-to-1 ratio. We like to use that practice. So you're going to, for every negative reinforcement, you want to give 4 positive reinforcements. So that's what our kids are learning, that when if they're doing something, you want to reinforce it. For every negative, you're giving them 4 positives. So that's so important. And we use that practice at elementary. So that's how this is set up. So when you take a look at the results for the highest number, question number 3, which was my school wants me to do well. They rated that high overall amongst all the elementary schools, grades 3 and 4. And I think I attribute a lot of this to the fact, especially at the elementary level, morning announcements and afternoon announcements. We do 4 Bs every morning, say it. And then we have the mantra at the end, which is part of our matrix with our expectations, is be the best you can be everywhere, every time. So they're hearing that every day in the morning. They're hearing that when they leave as well. So I think that has a lot to do with why that scored as high as it did. Question number 4 was the next. My school has clear rules for behavior. That again is the behavior, the matrix. So teaching them the expected behaviors. What are the positive behaviors you're expected to do? And that's all part of that teaching and reteaching of the matrix. Question 5, teachers treat me with respect. Again, that goes with what we're talking about. It's making connections, respecting, showing students you respect them. They know you care about them. One of the things that at elementary level, just doing morning duty and dismissal duty, having itinerant interventionists doing those duties too, seeing the kids, welcoming them by first name as they walk through the door means so much to them, saying goodbye to them by name and have a good night, and that too as they exit. So just those little things that were due at elementary that I think help make that score go as high as it was. And then the question number 10, there's an adult in my school that can help me if I need it. And another practice that I can speak to that I do after my classroom lessons, I do it after groups, I do it one-on-one sessions. I always ask students to name at least one adult in your building that you know you can go to if you need something. And it's so important that they recognize and can name a person. And I even, when they transition and we get them ready for middle school, it's always saying, it may not be Mrs. Williams there, but there is another counselor there. And knowing what that role is and who those people are and just making those connections, I think is so important and helps with that. And then also we do practice the stop, walk, and talk strategy at Rob. And we do teach this along with our matrix and our expectations. We tell students, if someone's not following the 4 Bs, you need to let them know to stop and then walk away. If that continues, then you need to talk by telling an adult. And we tell them and emphasize not just an adult at school, but tell an adult at home. So it's important that they're letting someone at home know as well as at school. If they tried to stop something and it didn't stop, now I need help and I need to go to that adult that I can trust that can help me. And then Chad, you can do the next slide, please. And this slide is represented of, this was the question that students at elementary level did not rate as high. So when you take a look at our strengths that we just saw, we're looking at our needs. So again, this goes with what Billy was talking about. To achieve those desirable outcomes, we have to have effective systems and put those practices to work and then use our data so that we can measure those outcomes and see how we're doing. So again, the student voice is telling us that students are perceiving in grades 3 and 4 that my class isn't behaving in a manner that my teacher can teach. So we do have to ask, what are we currently doing as a school, as a district, that we need to do? What are we doing? What can we do to improve so that's sustained over time? So we take a look at that. And one of the few things come to mind with me with this particular one, maybe we need more reteaching, because if my classmates aren't allowing my teacher to teach, there's some reteaching that might need to happen with the expectations. And again, like at that tier 1 level, do it all over again, maybe tier 2 if it's a specific grade level. Also practicing consistent classroom management. That could be another solution or another practice to try to get that question scored a little higher. And then employing the 4-to-1 ratio. So for every negative response, we say 4 positive reinforcements for that negative behavior. So those are the elementary level climate survey results. And then Dr. Miller's going to go ahead and do the middle school and high school.
Chad, if you can go to the next slide. So this is the Central Mountain Middle School and High School. So the Central Mountain Middle School is in red. I know some of it's small to see, and Central Mountain High School is in blue. Bucktail didn't take the climate survey, so that's why they're not on there. And I'll just read questions 1 through 9 because they're a little bit different than the ones that Christina did, but so you know what the ratings are. Question 1 is I like school. Question 2, I feel successful at school. 3, I feel my school has standards for achievement. 4, my school sets clear rules for behavior. 5, teachers treat me with respect. 6, the behaviors in my class allow my teachers to teach. 7, students are frequently recognized for good behavior. 8, school is a place at which I feel safe. And 9, I know an adult at school that I can talk to if I need help. So if you can go to the next slide, Chad. We broke it down by middle school. So the 4 highest ratings for the middle school was my school sets clear rules for behavior. So again, we're teaching those and reteaching those expectations of school rules. Teachers treat me with respect. School is a place which I feel safe, and I know an adult at school that I can talk to if I need help. You can go to the next slide. So for the middle school, the area of need was I like school. Hopefully that's going to get better as the restrictions of COVID are lifted and students are able to interact more. We've added back our monthly incentives, which we weren't doing during COVID. So kids are getting out and having fun. We're doing the clubs again at the middle school. So hopefully those kind of things that will help. But like I said before in that one slide, this is the data that we'll go back to. We go to our student teams to get their feedback, like what can we do to improve this? Both committees are meeting over the summer. So again, we're using this data and we're going to do things over the summer so that we're kicking off the ground running basically in September and really getting better interventions in place than what we've even done this past year. So if you can go to the next slide, Chad, this is for Central Mountain High School. So those are the highest ones. I feel successful at school. Teachers treat me with respect. The behaviors in my class allow my teachers to teach, and I know an adult at school that I can talk to if I need help. So those are the highest ones for the high school. And if you can go to the next one. And the one that was rated the lowest is students are frequently recognized for good behavior. And as they mentioned, that's just starting. So that should easily get a lot better next year as they're doing some different reinforcements. Again, getting that student voice to see what are some things that they would be motivated at to be recognized for. So if you can go to the next slide, Kelly's going to do that one.
So this slide just talks to you about why it's important for us to survey students on how they perceive the climate of our school buildings. So we know it is associated with higher school achievement. We know that it builds a greater sense of connectedness. It also strengthens relationships and lowers problematic behaviors. And the final slide that we just wanted to end our presentation, if we teach a student how to do an addition problem and they come up with 1 + 1 is 5, what's our very first level intervention is that we typically will reteach that specific skill. Maybe we didn't teach it to mastery the first time that we taught it, so we try to come up with a different way that we teach that specific skill. Or if you're teaching your own children or children you love to ride a bicycle and they fall off the bicycle, we encourage them to get back up on the bicycle and give it another shot, or we tell them to pedal faster, whatever it might be. Whereas opposed to many times when a student makes a behavioral error, we jump right in with a consequence. So we wouldn't think of using a timeout when a student falls off their bicycle. So we want to try to figure out what's a better way that we can really teach students to have those, find a better way to get those needs met through more positive, appropriate behaviors. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we're glad to hear any questions you have.
Okay, so I promised Elizabeth I would start with her. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you. First, I just want to let you know, I am just over the top, ecstatically happy that this is happening. But my biggest concern is the commitment. Is this a long-term integrated process that's just like we have PE class, we have math class, we have et cetera, or is this going to be like a snapshot, like a 1 to 5 year program? And then, I mean, of course, things have to get modified over the years. That's not, but again, is this just going to be like a study, or is this going to be like part of the district?
Can take that one. This is not this year's new best thing. This has been a multi-year approach to a system change or system redesign, K through 12. We're not all there yet. As this group has explained, starting with the elementary, moving into middle school, there were previous PBIS programs in the district that were not being done to Fidelity. And so we have a lot of different people in a lot of key positions than we have in previous years. They're also very experienced in this. They've had success in it in other districts, and it's taking some time to reteach the staff and also make sure that the staff knows that we are committed to this and this is the expectation. And just as you saw with our students, we set high expectations and we provide a high level of support. We are doing the same thing with the staff. We set high expectations, we set high levels of support. I know that Mrs. Manning has been working very hard with Mrs. Swartwood, our behavior specialist, to train staff members. There have been full day trainings. And as hard as it is to get substitutes, we feel it's so important that we have made a commitment to try to get classes covered so that we can get this training done through the school day. And there are school-wide teams in every building. and they are continuing to grow. I will say that at the secondary level, not every teacher is informed to this level yet, because we're starting with those core team members to help teach and train the other members in the building. So we're not at our goal. We're just going to continue to strive and work towards it. I feel very strongly that we have the right tools and we have the right people to make this something that is sustainable and over a period of time should continue to get better, because as we're doing is we're using the results to constantly study, analyze, and it's a continuous improvement cycle.
Yes, Elizabeth.
The one data set that I didn't see, and of course, we're getting a broad view summary, which we deeply appreciate. One data set I didn't see is student to teacher ratios. In other words, if you have, let's say, you find repeated problems or situations, challenges in a particular set, not pinpointing on the teacher, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying, if you look at a data set and let's say classrooms that have, let's just say 12 students for whatever reason per teacher, and let's say they have one support person in that class at all times. And then you have another class who are teaching similar things, similar age group, but that class happens to have 20 children. So I hope I've clarified my question correctly, that I don't see any correlation between student to teacher support ratios for the classroom. Is that being taken into consideration? Or
Well, you
maybe
wouldn't
it's
see
not
that.
necessary?
Well, you wouldn't see that data point in this presentation, but that is something that clearly each building team knows when they're looking at that Swiss data and they see certain locations. The next step is to look at the why. And I think that Kelly addressed that. What is the why? Why is this happening? And so those variables, such as what you're talking about, could be a potential variable. And sometimes it's not even just pure numbers, it's who is involved and what training does that person have or what experience. And I'm going to just take a stab at this, but many times we get substitute teachers who have not had teaching experience. We love when our retired teachers come back and help us out because they tend to not have as many discipline problems, but there are many times when a substitute teacher is in and our varsity is not on the field. We do see higher levels of behavior issues when substitutes are in the building. And so those are the type of variables that would be analyzed with the problem solving.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Deeply appreciated this presentation and super excited to see the next data sets. Keep it up.
Yes, Butch.
I just have a question on slide 11, when you talked about the school climate surveys. How do we change the perception that we have out there in some of our schools that some of the kids aren't behaving and kids are afraid to go to school? And, you know, I just heard one the other day about a kid at the middle school over here afraid to ride a bus to school because he gets there too early. They have to have the parent bring him to school because there's stuff being done early before the classes start. How do we change that perception?
You mean the community perception, Butch?
Yeah, how do we change the community's perception? I mean,
I think we keep trying. Kelly, you can answer that too, because it's your bailiwick, but I also think that we need to continue to keep trying. We need to continue to provide the school board and the public with the data sets that we have. I mean, those slides that you saw, that comes directly from students. And so I just think we keep continuing to promote that. And, you know, the one slide that said more fun things, the majority of our students are doing what they're expected to do the majority of the time. And we need to continue to reinforce and acknowledge. It's not rewarding them for doing what they're supposed to do. It's acknowledging the fact that, hey, you're doing the right thing, keep it up. And so that's what the kids want. I spent the last 2 days, Friday and today, meeting with the senior class officers of the class of 2022, Central Mountain and Bucktail. And that's one of the things that they have asked for. And I think they've been robbed of some of that through the pandemic, but they want more time to do stuff with their friends and fun settings with their teachers. Yeah. And so I think when we can continue to start pulling those things back in and we continue to promote the good things that are happening, hopefully that will help the situation. But I also would like to rely on Kelly's expertise in that area.
And I definitely appreciate the climate surveys for that because it gives us actual stakeholder representation statements. So there is a piece of the community perception, and then we're using that data to actually put practices in place. And it really truly goes back to that slide that Dr. Miller mentioned to you. We're actually using the data that we get to change our practices that we have in place. So if we have, we saw through our surveys that parents feel, and parents are the ones that responded that way, that they feel like we don't, maybe there should be more opportunities for them to be involved in our schools. And so how do we do that? And what kind of ways can we make those changes? And then we say, we made these changes because we asked you to complete the survey. I always say, never ask anyone to do a survey if we're not going to use the data to make a change in a practice. So we want to let them know we're actually looking at that data and we're changing what we do based upon that data. And I truly think that that's going to be our, key to changing perception.
Is there another part of it that might maybe look at how many of our staff send their students to other schools besides Keystone Central?
This survey specifically does not ask.
Because I'm
questions
kind
like
of curious.
that.
I know, I've heard there's quite a few staff and administrators here that send their kids like to Lock Haven Catholic School or places like that. I know why. And I think,
Well, I think they have religious, I mean, if they choose that because that's what they want for their child, I mean, I don't know that it's because they don't choose this. I think it's the positive choice too, sometimes.
I don't think it's all religious, but I like to hear, just know why they chose that school over our schools. So when they work here every day.
Question on the surveys. I'm assuming, and it's dangerous to assume anything, but I'm wondering, are they anonymized?
They are.
Okay.
Yep. And it specifically states that on the survey before folks are asked to complete the survey. It's a clickable link. So the only piece is people can complete the survey multiple times if they so choose to skew the data in some way, shape, or form. But we did not have a huge participation by the community last time. So we're hopeful to increase that. We have put some practices in place as far as that if students come back and report to us that their family completed the survey, they might earn a point in their acknowledgement system. So we have some practices that we're putting in place to improve so that we get a better representation community voice as well.
Yeah, that was my question, is how many people actually
It
did the
varied among schools for sure. And we had enough that we were able to generate results. So if the survey size is so small, we don't have enough that won't generate results for us. So.
Well, that was my question along those same lines. Of all the data you showed here, that to me, the school climate data was most telling. And I guess my question is, what were the number of students that actually responded to this? Was it every student? Was it just certain ones, or I would hope it was everybody.
We do have those numbers. I mean, we could certainly provide those numbers for you. Again, it varied amongst schools. And I don't know them off the top of my head, but you can go into the system and it tells you exactly the number of school personnel, the number of students at the grade level. You can look at the data specific by grade level. And that's one thing that's very nice about the system, is it allows you to look at those trends across third graders, look at the trends across ninth graders. We know ninth grade's a challenging year when students transition in. Fifth grade transitioning to middle school, what's their perception when they come into the middle school? So that's one thing that's pretty neat about the survey.
Yeah, I would think that it would be more valid if the greater the number of students
For
that
sure.
would respond to it.
Yep. In some of our schools, the numbers were very high. In other schools, they weren't as high, but we can certainly provide that data if you'd like to have that data.
But I think the other thing that's important is the accountability the upper administration is holding within our district now, as opposed to, I was just a taxpayer before. And I heard from teacher friends, I heard from my own kids when they were in the district before, there wasn't that accountability. When those surveys went out the first round, there wasn't as much completion. And these ladies put that back out there like, no, that's not okay. You need to make this a priority. And so the numbers weren't quite as high, but as they're starting to understand, these are the expectations, everybody's doing it, kind of goes with what Elizabeth was saying. Things are not going to go away. We're going to do things the right way. Everybody's going to do them. And there's going to be the support there so that we can do it. It's just an amazing feeling to see that accountability. And because obviously it gives us better data too, if you have near 100% completion.
Right. I mean, the accountability piece is very important because if not everybody buys into it, it's just like anything else, it's not going to work. So as long as, and it sounds like that's happening, that they're holding them to it. And I think that's the most important part. So be anxious to see how it progresses.
Good. Christina, question for you. You were the one that was presenting slide 13, the elementary stuff. What was question 1 and question
yep.
2? Because that went,
Yeah,
that was
question-
right around the same level as 11. So that's why I was kind of.
What, yeah, I like school was question 1,
Okay,
and I
I'm not
feel
gonna
like
look
I
at it.
do well, and school was question 2.
Okay, well, that's. Okay,
Or, oh, and then 11 was the one that wasn't rated high, that students in my class behave, yeah, so that the
well,
teacher
all-
can teach.
All 3 of those are right around the same level, so.
Yeah, because I,
all
yeah.
right. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
But we got to maintain the 4-to-1 ratio, so we can only call out one bad one unless we wanna call out a lot more good
Oh,
ones.
all right.
But we still know about them.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was very informative, and it's good to hear that the changes are being made. And
I'd like to let the
implemented.
board know that this was not something that I asked or required this group to do. They came forward and asked if they could come and share this information with you because we're very proud of the results and the things that are going on in our district. And so I just think that's a huge testament to the work that you're doing at the building level and the ground level. And kudos to you and keep up the great work.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I would hope that we can have you back sometime in the future and maybe give us an update, see how things are moving with this, because it is very interesting.
Class of 86, represent.
This is how old we are, Roger.
All right.
All right, thank you. All right, we don't have anybody signed up to speak this evening, so we will move on to our superintendent's report.
Thank you. Yesterday was National School Nurses Day. Over the last 2 years, the role of the school nurse has been amplified by COVID-19. The pandemic has truly illustrated how school nursing is so strongly rooted in public health. School health is specialized practice of nursing in which school nurses link healthcare and education with the goal to optimize health and safety while the student is learning. Our schools truly couldn't operate without our school nurses. And with regards to COVID-19, there have been several positive cases in our area recently. We're still in the low range for COVID-19. However, I just want to reiterate to everyone that our current health and safety plan states that we will follow CDC recommendations with regards to contact tracing and notification to families. So the current recommendations from the CDC, which have changed over the last couple of months, include that they no longer recommend universal contact tracing in schools. And the recommendation is, though, that if we are aware of a positive case and there is contact tracing that we're aware of, that we can inform parents that their child may was a close contact with a known case, and that we would recommend that the parents have the choice to determine the next steps. And all of that is, of course, from the CDC guidelines. And we're beginning tomorrow. We will be operating on the assumption that we will inform parents, but yet the next steps regarding quarantining, regarding masking, and any additional medical care would be at the discretion of the parents. So that will begin tomorrow. I will put a communication out to all of our staff and families tomorrow as well. Beginning on June 8th, Keystone Central School District is going to begin something called Walk-in Wednesdays. And Walk-in Wednesdays between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. Anyone who is interested in joining our team seeking employment can walk in the door, and we will help them get introduced to the district, what positions we have available. We'll assist everyone with filling out the applications online or on paper. We'll assist everyone with the necessary paperwork to find clearances, and we will continue to seek viable employees. I think later on the agenda this evening is the board is giving me the authority to appoint some people as we have viable hires with all paperwork, clearances, et cetera, that you would give me the opportunity to appoint these folks We are in desperate need of support staff help, particularly the area of custodial and maintenance areas. We also are seeking a lot of support in paraprofessionals or classroom aides, personal care aides for the next school year, as well as cafeteria workers. And we're also partnering with Susquehanna Trailways on this initiative, and we'll be working with them to hopefully find some additional bus drivers. As you all know, that's also been a concern. So walk-in Wednesdays begin June 8th, and we'll start publicizing that very soon. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend the legislative breakfast at IU10 with 3 members of this board, Tracy, Roger, and Jeff. We had several legislators in attendance, and I felt some very meaningful discussions with legislators. In previous years, I felt that some of the things that we've been advocating for has fallen on deaf ears. But in the conversations yesterday, we focused on 3 main areas. One was staffing shortages. The other was focusing on career and technical education funding for that, as well as staffing and certifications in that area. And we also discussed my favorite topic, charter funding reform. And there was some very good support from our representatives specific to cyber charters. And I really would like to give a special shout out to Senator Chris Dush and also Representative Carrie Benninghoff, who were present yesterday. And I felt really took the time to ask some follow-up questions, seeking some additional information. And I believe that they are advocates for public education. And then finally, I would like to say that the class of 2022 would cordially like to invite the board of directors to the end of the year events. And in front of your places is a scroll and an envelope from those 2 high schools. And we hope to see you there. You now have your formal invitations to these pomp and circumstance and some other events.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no committees have met since our work session last week. Under reports, the financial reports have been attached now. And under G, the board, like Dr. Martin mentioned, there is, we discussed authorizing her to fill vacancies over the summer to help get our staffing levels up and not have to wait a month or so for people to be approved, for them to be able to start work. I'm trying to look for any other additions. And so, Mr. Elling,
Okay. That being said, I'd like to make a motion to approve the entire agenda except for those items suspicious. Yeah.
specifically.
Wow, I cannot talk.
Just say request.
Specifically removed for consideration.
Okay, we do need to pull J3.
I need to pull J8. Again, to clarify, not because I'm not in favor of it, it's because it involves my employer.
Right.
Okay. Any others? Yeah, we need a second. We have a motion
I'll
to.
make second.
Okay, so all those in favor of passing the entirety of the agenda with the exception of J3 and J8, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
All right. I would like to make a motion to move the J3, the proposed final general budget.
I'll
Second that.
Who got it?
Pick
The
one.
one in the red shirt.
Well, it's not me. I think this is burden.
Okay, so we need a roll call on this.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes,
Mr. Dietrich,
Could you clarify again? I'm not sure I understand. So this is to approve,
yes,
to
approve the
move it forward?
the
Approve.
proposed general
To
budget.
Yeah.
move it forward? Yes, then yes.
Mr. Elling,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Knopf,
Yes.
Ms. Lynch,
Yes.
7 yes votes, motion carries.
Okay, I also like to move that we pass J8, and that is the Lock Haven University Facility Use Agreement.
Let's do a roll call on that also.
We can get a second.
Oh, sorry.
Second.
Thank you.
I thought one of you were gonna do it.
I
These
can't.
aren't quick
Oh,
enough
yeah, you
tonight.
can.
Come on.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Dietrich,
Yes.
Mr. Elling,
Yes.
Mr. Johnston,
Yes.
Mr. Knopf,
Yes.
Ms. Lynch,
Yes.
and Mr. Miller. Oh,
I abstain.
6 yes votes, motion passes. Oh,
Okay.
and 1 abstention.
With that, I'd like to move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.